you. Oh dear, I think that could get quiet. That could get rather tired rather quickly, rather. Hope everyone's well and welcome to the show. So, tonight, I thought it might be quite fun to talk a little bit and to play some exclusive tracks from my band, Rocketgoldstar, and finally, this album, which has been a very, very long time in the making. I thought I'd talk a little bit about it, and maybe in doing so, there's a whole bunch of issues that maybe some of you can relate to, and a lot of that relates to this idea of when you're making your own music, just kind of letting go of it a little bit and deciding something's good enough. And this will be a kind of occurring thing with me in many ways. Sorry, I should explain that a little bit better. Rocketgoldstar, by the way, is a three-piece band with three very much equal kind of members. You know, all of us kind of sing and all of us write and produce, and many bands, they have like a definite sort of front person. I'm often seen as the front person of the band in many ways, but really it's very much an equal three-way thing. I'm just checking in with chat room, making sure all is good before I plow on too much. Some of you may have seen a review I did for the Silver Bullet rack unit. I did it for Sonic State last year. And that's a really fabulous, fabulous piece of equipment. Sadly, not here anymore. Had to go. I'd love one though, blimey. But yeah, that's essentially a processor, like a rack unit for giving analog flavor to ostensibly digitally made tracks. Hello, chatties. Yeah, that's great. I can see we have got a show. Fab. Okay. Right. Let's get stuck in. Okay. And I'm taking kind of questions as well, if anyone does have anything they'd like to ask me about this. But yeah, let me tell you a little bit about this band then, because some of you who know me may know a little bit about it. Others, I'm sure this will be, the first time you'll have encountered this band, but it goes back a long way with me, and I think it might give you a little bit more of an understanding of where I kind of come from. So Rocketgoldstar, we became Rocketgoldstar in 1995, and it was really an evolution of a band that started in 1993. We started off as like a kind of party funk band. In fact, we had funk in our name, well, sort of. Funkelbod, it was called. And that was a band that I formed, and I was the front man of Funkelbod. I was a bass player, but I decided I didn't want to play bass. I wanted to be a front man of a band. So when I formed that band, I actually, looked for a bass player, and in a chap called Tim Buckland, a wonderful bass player, joined the band, along with a few other people, and it was actually initially a 6-piece band. And that initial lineup, it was a lot of fun. And the first gig we did was, it was brilliant, and the band was straight away popular, straight away from the beginning. We had great gigs, and it just seemed to chime in with the times a little bit. Back in 1993, sorry, I just got distracted and needed to see the chat room. Oh, okay, great. Biff in the chat room's asking us to play Tong Gwynlais. That's funny. That's one of our songs, by the way. But back in 1993, the musical landscape was really interesting, actually. What had happened in Britain, the whole DJ culture, rave culture, and house music, hardcore rave, all of these kind of rave culture. All of these sort of musics directly related to sort of rave culture had sort of taken over, and bands had fallen out of fashion almost overnight. Once that scene really kicked off, and felt really torn by this back in the day, because I was quite excited about all this new. Well, I mean, it was like a kind of cultural revolution. The illegal raves. I mean, that's one way of putting it. They were called illegal raves, I think, largely by a very hostile media. I mean, they were free parties, or raves. The illegal bit was just this thing that was really kind of bandied around a lot. The media, that especially that right-wing media, the Daily Mail in Britain, and really pushing this narrative that this was an entirely destructive thing, and they would put the fear into people that raves would be coming, and your children will be kind of swallowed up by these raves, and be forced to have loads of drugs shoved down their throat and all that kind of stuff. Whereas, in the most, that whole rave scene was absolutely bountiful with positivity and good vibes, and really an awakening of a new consciousness. I mean, that's certainly how it seemed to be for many of us. There was, there wasn't very much of a festival culture in Britain at the time. There were some of the big festivals. The Glastonbury Festival would take place, and then there was the Reading Festival, and then you had more specialist festivals like the Cambridge Folk Festival and Cropredy and Brecon Jazz and some other ones. But festival culture, as we come to know it, and hopefully will return to, that didn't really take off big time in Britain until, probably more like 6 or 7 years later than the period I'm talking about, early 90s. So by about the mid to late 90s, that's when things started to take off with the festivals. What was happening in the earlier part of the 90s, though, were much more like unofficial, parties and the like. And and yeah, just noticed in the chat room, happy people hugging. There was a lot of that. I mean, it was a really interesting time. A friend of mine who I met in 91 was somebody who was really influential in me, sort of, going to raves and actually challenging my prejudice, my musician prejudice about this kind of, rave culture. You see, back in 1990, 1991, around that time, the music was kind of pretty horrible in many ways. It was a lot of just really, really hectic, and hadn't really fully formed yet. It was a lot of interesting ideas, obviously influenced by Chicago house and Detroit techno and that sort of thing. But I think a lot of people who were just kind of learning the ropes back then. So the music was kind of chaotic, and there wasn't a lot of musical quality in it. There was a lot of kind of I think there was a lot of people who were making tunes, but they weren't really making tunes in a way where they had any idea about how to make tunes. But that was what was kind of also brilliant about it. Like, loads of people were piling and making things from their bedrooms, and really that is one of the crucial things, because we kind of talk about the sort of, this kind of rave revolution in Britain. This obviously something, it happened in other countries at various times. I think in Britain, 88 was its big sort of breakthrough year. But really, those kind of warehouse raves in 88, they call 88 like the second summer of love. For me, I would actually say that was 1993. But in 1988, it was much more in exclusive little kind of parts of London, and you had to be in the know. Certainly wasn't something that had reached out into the provinces. I was from North Wales, so although I moved to South Wales, still in Wales obviously, in the early 90s, so it took a little bit of time before it kind of really filtered out, and and through that same period, the music was developing. It was becoming, well, it hadn't quite splintered into all the genres. You know, it really got silly, all the specific genres that it all turned into. But you certainly didn't have this kind of definition. You could go to, you know, a tent which was doing drum and bass, or another one which was doing sort of gabba, or, you know, it wasn't really like that. That was starting to happen. In fact, I know people ask me to talk about the KLF, and I do like talking about the KLF. And the Chill Out album that KLF released back at the turn of the 90s was really the dawning of this kind of the idea of a chill out room. But for me, that also, that whole kind of development of the ambient thing was, you know, it was a real respite to get out of the main room with the just sort of constant sort of techno, or, you know, rave, just to kind of escape and get into somewhere for the chill out. But I was much more attracted to what was happening musically, like in this ambient, in that sort of ambient genre. And was it 91? I think it was 91 where Orb released Adventures Beyond the Ultraworld. And that was the album that, in many ways, I think just created a whole subgenre, you know, the whole kind of ambient. I know Brian Eno had been, you know, is largely regarded as the godfather of ambient, but just in terms of ambient as a genre that kind of fitted within the within this kind of burgeoning rave scene. What would happen in the chill out room was that all sorts of music would happen in the chill out room. So you'd get things like the KLF and Orb or whatever, but also there was a little crossover into sort of things like acid jazz, which was also breaking quite big at the time. And I really liked that. That really connected. I got really big time into sort of like the funk and acid jazz scene of the early 90s. I think largely because it was more kind of traditional instrument based, which was more where my passions lay. Just so checking in with the chat room. It's so funny. It's so lovely to see everybody there. Did I go to many raves back then? I went to quite a few. I had a sound system, a small sound system as well, and this is what I was just going to kind of lead into. So I would be coerced into taking that sound system into some of these kind of, these were just small kind of gatherings really of a few hundred people, maybe a few more, maybe a bit more than that, but that was really good fun actually. I mean, but that period though, this transition really of the kind of whole music scene in Britain, it really is quite a profound change, because if you look at the bands of the really big bands of, say, the 1970s, I mean, this is all like kind of post-Beatles, but all the big touring bands, more or less the big ones, were all kind of British. The big rock bands, you know, from Zeppelin and Purple, and bands like Yes and ELP and ELO and Supertramp and Fleetwood Mac, although they became transatlantic. But they're big bands were kind of largely British bands. I mean, there were some big other bands, you know, the Eagles and other things, but actually rock was kind of largely kind of dominated by the Brits. In the early 90s, British rock had gone down the toilet, really. So that America totally dominated, and with those amazing bands in the early 90s from, you know, Rage Against the Machine and Soundgarden and Nirvana and Mudhoney and loads of them on there, you know, Jane's Addiction, really interesting stuff. And kind of America then dominated kind of rock music. So Britain though, just had started to embrace the kind of whole kind of rave and electronic music scene gigantically, you know, so much so that bands, they were kind of passé. So, you know, if you wanted to get gigs at raves, I mean, that was not, those kind of raves weren't set up for bands particularly. But if you played gigs with DJs back then, it was always a bit cringy because the sound of the band would sound quite weedy compared to the DJs, and everybody wanted the donk, everybody wanted the four on the floor, and bands it just didn't translate very well back at the time. So this transitional period, I think for me, I got really into prog rock from the age of 16, and that was what I kind of wanted to play. I wanted to play sort of twisty, turny sort of music with lots of riffs and lots of, like time changes and, sectional, very tightly arranged and written music, which when we get into this kind of Rocketgoldstar stuff, that will kind of make sense. But I wanted to give some context to the background because I think that particular period of time really informs what happened. So I was in this band. It was more ambitious than it was really anything. It was called Gideon Super Sponge, and it featured Jason Jason Jervis from the Taurus Man synth channel, funnily enough. But as a band, we weren't really. It wasn't really going anywhere, and I decided to form a band on the side, just that was more to explore my kind of love of the kind of acid jazz and the funk side of things. That's when I decided, as I say, to become a front man and to do I have to admit, actually quite influenced by Jamiroquai, who had recently just appeared on the scene, and JK and the front man, sort of aspired to be a bit like him. I'm a dancer. I am a dancer. I like to call myself a dancer. Music, when it passes through me, my body relates, my body loves to dance, involuntarily. I just, so I wanted to explore that kind of thing. So I became this kind of front man, and I put this band together, this 6-piece band, called it Funkelbod. And I say, straight away, it was just a super popular band because it kind of connected with what people wanted, because people wanted to dance. And the sole purpose of that band was to make people dance, And that still is one of my absolute favourite things, is making people dance as well, So when this band had started getting popular, we were in Neath in South Wales, which is a funny, lovely place. I got lots of fond memories of that place. I'm friends still there. But we needed to kind of move on a little bit from there. But one of the things that really influenced the band in the early days was the percussionist who joined the band was a chap called Julian Palladino, amazing percussionist. And his brother is Pino Palladino, who is, don't sound particularly Welsh, but Pino is probably Wales's greatest musical export. After Tom Jones. No, Pino as a bass, but Pino Palladino was, oh my goodness, and is still one of the absolute top bass players in the world, and I was a gigantic fan of his. So for his brother to join the band, that was a gigantic thrill for me. But it was also cool because Julian was a little bit older than the rest of us and had quite a lot of experience. He'd played in Jules Holland's band, and I guess through connectivity with his brother, but also Julian was very much part of the Cardiff music scene, and and he'd travelled as well, and he kind of knew about stuff. So he was very influential in that early part. And yes, I didn't mention Shirley Bassey, because another of Wales's big musical exports. But yeah, Julian was really kind of a fantastic groove musician as well. He had a deep understanding of groove. So when he joined the band, it really kind of it sealed the kind of groove and gave it this extra energy that just made it really irresistible and brilliant band back then. But one of the people in the band, the chap who he joined the band on guitar, a chap called Frank Norton. Now, Frank, as we'll see, becomes the kind of really crucial person in this story. Frank he's probably the most influential person in my life, actually, Frank. His kind of ideas, musical ideas and whatnot. But back then, he joined as a guitarist, but it turned out that he was an electronic musician as well. And he was from London and had left London to go to this music course that was in Neath. And that's how I'd gone down there, because this was the first college in Britain, I think, to offer modern music diplomas and that sort of thing. Lots of colleges everywhere do it now, but back then it was really unique. I'd read about it in Guitarist magazine, so that's how I'd learnt about it. Many people had as well, and people came from all over the place to do this course, which was quite fun because Neath isn't really a student town at all, so it wasn't like there was a kind of student sort of culture. We were just straight into Neath culture, which is kind of brilliant. But there wasn't really like an established sort of music scene as such of brilliant musicians there. So we had to make a lot of our own kind of thing. And anyway, but this Frank Norton, though, he had actually just recorded a debut album, and it just got released after he'd moved away from home and after he joined the band. So this album came out, and it was Musique, like that's a backwards Musique with Mike Paradinas. Now this album was called Tango Invective, and it went on to become one of the most influential electronic albums of its time. It was released on Reflex, which was Aphex Twin's label, and Mike Paradinas certainly became known as a contemporary to Aphex Twin, and the other guy who was part of that scene, Luke Vibert, who would use a bunch of different names like Wagon Christ, and same with Mike Paradinas. He would use pseudonyms like Jake Slazenger as well. And so Frank was he was part of this kind of IDM, it got called at the time, which everybody who was involved in it hated that term. You know, we've heard of EDM, but IDM was what? Intelligent dance music, it was called, which is a pretty barf-inducing name. But this sort of chimed with what I was talking about in the earlier part, where this music from this kind of rave influence had started to sort of broaden out and become a lot more interesting. And bands like Orbital, who were incredibly important in this kind of thing as well, and as well as they mentioned, the Orb, were kind of bringing in kind of tunes and musicianship in a way that had, that really expanded the genre in so many ways. So, so that Tango Invective came out, and I don't think Frank necessarily thought it was going to be a particularly popular album or something, but it did. It went on to be this, as I say, incredibly influential album. And Mike Paradinas was the driving force of music, but if you look at Frank was, I think there was about 4 of his tunes on that first album, and he was partially involved in the second album as well, but that was kind of the end of that. And I still feel really guilty for sort of snaffling him, really, and squandering his music career, that by trying to keep them all to myself. Well, it wasn't quite like that, but the thing that was really interesting there was, though, that that I got a lot more for my money than I bargained for with getting Frank into the band, because he subsequently introduced me to so many interesting and frankly quite revolutionary ideas, musical ideas. And I would say he's still probably the biggest musical genius that I've ever worked with. And I've worked with some fantastic people, but Frank's brain and his musical brain, gosh, was so developed way back then when, he was like kind of 19 or whatever he was, but he was so musically developed. It was amazing. But what happened then with the band was, as I say, we started as this funk band. We were writing tunes with the intention of it being party music, dance music, but with a live band. And that's how it started. And we decided after about, 18 months or so, that we wanted to really take it seriously and kind of go for it and go for the record deal. And we thought, well, the best way for us to do that, because everybody was had just finished their kind of college stuff, so everybody was kind of free and ready for whatever happened next. And we decided to look for a place in the countryside where we could all live. And so a bit like the Monkees, we the band the Monkees, we found this beautiful little farmhouse up near Abergavenny in South Wales, up on a mountain, really kind of quite, you had to go through a gate and drive up a dirt track, winding your way up the mountain. And this old cottage, it was over 500 years old. It was just nestled in a little dip on this mountain. It was a beautiful, amazing place. And the whole band, which at the time had reduced down to about four people at that time. We'd gone down from 6 down to 4. But all 4 musicians all moved into this little cottage. And this was one of the best times of my life, because when we were in that cottage, we put together a studio. We had like a MIDI studio, and Frank had bought a lot of bits and bobs. Julian Palladino, he had an Akai S950 sampler, which he was using for his percussion set. He had some sort of pads and triggers that he could do. We were dead chuffed because Julian's really good friends with what's his name, Gary. He was a percussionist in Pink Floyd, so we had all of Pink Floyd's percussion samples because I think they were using a 950 on the tour. So we were dead chuffed. It was like having a member of Pink Floyd in the band, sort of. But Frank bought an S950 as well. So in our little studio, we had 2 Akai S950s. I think they were both expanded as well, but what's that, 2 megabytes of sample time or something? And super crucially, Cubase running on Atari ST. And various bits of outboard and synths. But we had that room, and we had another room, which was where we would play, and that room had a big bay window which just had this incredible view right down the valley. So when we would be rehearsing, we just had this terrific view. And in the window, in the sort of the bay, we actually got hold of we got an old Hammond, an L100, and we had the Hammond in the window. So you'd sit and play the Hammond whilst just sort of like with this beautiful, gigantic panoramic view. It was just. I still dream about this place. A really, really special time for me. But this was brilliant time because we could make as much noise as we wanted 24 hours a day. And we often, we'd play through the night often, And there was no one really to bother with the noise. And because we had this other little studio room as well, it allowed us just to start kind of getting into recording ourselves. And and what we used to do, this is before hard disk recording you were able to do hard disk recording, but we would sample like 4 bars of the band playing into the 950 or into the 950s, and we would kind of try and essentially sort of do what hard disk recording would allow us to do, where we'd be recording little slithers of the band and then use Cubase to sequence the samples of us playing to create sort of backing tracks that were really nice and tight and were on the grid, so we could then, bring it into the MIDI world. Yeah, and I say this is back By now, it was rough. Yeah, I think we were into about 1995 when this was all kind of set up. But Julian had managed to sort of land us a recording deal, which gave us an opportunity to work in a beautiful studio in Cardiff. But it also, our focus then was, as a band living up in this mountain, to start work on material for an album. Now, because we were away from where we had been, where we were much more in the thick of things, with going to lots of parties and being, and playing lots of gigs, to being a lot more like kind of hermits on the mountain. And quite often it would just be me and Frank. The other two would be off doing other things, and me and Frank would be in this house often for months at a time. And if the snow came, we would be snowed in. I mean, like, you wouldn't be able to get your vehicle up the track, and my goodness, there were some severe winters in Britain around 95 and 96. Oh my goodness. But that kind of added to the whole sense of us just sort of being kind of locked into this kind of little world of musical adventure and discovery. I just love thinking about this. But something kind of crucial happened in the development of the music. One thing, Frank became much more involved in the writing. In the earlier days, I was pretty much the writer, getting everybody to do these kind of funk riffs and whatnot. But because we were living together, and because, as I mentioned, with Frank and his incredible kind of ideas, and coming from that Aphex Twin sort of twisted mindset, and really knowing things. I don't know how he could have known it from back then, but it started to really change the music. I guess the music that you write does often reflect where you are in life, or perhaps that's what it should do, but it certainly did in this case. And so our writing became a little bit more not introverted, but yeah, maybe less about party music and maybe more about a sort of sophisticated mishmash of ideas. So this developing music that was happening, as I mentioned, and we got into sort of jungle, which became drum and bass, and we were getting into all sorts of things. Frank was just he had a fantastic ear for for picking up on new ideas, and I was still, as I still am, stuck in the 70s in many ways. I just like that early 70s period. It's still my favourite period of music, and I really struggle to stop getting excited about new discoveries that I find from 1971. But through Frank, he was really kind of he was exposing me to new ideas and to think differently, and in many ways I was a bit stubborn in sort of just embracing certain things. I still had it in my mind that instrumental dexterity was something that people were interested in. I think Frank was more about kind of intellectual dexterity, I think. But this music started to change, and it started to form into something else. So much so that our kind of Funkelbod, band name just didn't really fit with where we were going musically. And I can't remember who it was, but somebody said that the music we were making was drastically different. So we thought, drastic. So we changed the name first to Drastic, which I don't know about it now. But we were called Drastic for a short amount of time. And whilst called Drastic, what was good about that was it just freed us up from actually writing sort of genre music. Instead of writing funk music with all the trappings that make it identifiably funk, it could be kind of anything now. We had more license to sort of do lots of things. One of Frank's great influences was the Pixies. I was never a huge fan, but I appreciated aspects of them. But that was a big influence on him, and the kind of quiet, loud, idea of really drastic dynamics became a thing. So we would really explore going like super loud bits and then play really, really quiet and really start playing with lots of dynamic form, you know. Sort of the whole post-rock thing hadn't really kind of started. It was just beginning, but we were certainly exploring things like that. But I was still the front man, and so it was still kind of, you know, vocal led music, but the instrumental aspect started to go through this really interesting kind of transitional thing. And we wrote a song, and Frank more or less wrote it, and then I kind of wrote the lyrics and some of the other parts. But he was sitting and he was strumming on a guitar, and above the fireplace in this cottage, we had a poster of a motorbike called a Rocketgoldstar by BSA, 1961, classic motorbike. And the reason that poster was there was that Tim, who was the bass player. Oh, there's a little bit of the story that I missed. I'll come back to, but Tim was a motorbike fanatic, and he was restoring a BSA Super Rocket, which is a bit like a Rocketgoldstar, not quite as cool. But that motorbike was in the rehearsal room as well. So we had our, you know, we had a Hammond, we had our, you know, amps and drum kits and percussion set up. And this motorbike, this beautiful, big, classic kind of 60s British motorbike in the rehearsal room as well, almost like another band member. And so Frank was writing a song going, you know, I just like kind of love to be as cool as a Rocketgoldstar. And this song developed and kind of became one of our main tunes. Anyway, yes, so I said I would just... When we became a four-piece, something had happened. We'd lost our original drummer. He was an incredible drummer. And we had another good drummer, but we never quite got back what we'd had in that original Funkelbod sort of days. But Tim, who was the bass player, was also a cracking drummer. He had a great feel and a real kind of funky pocket. So what would happen when we were living up in this house? Oh, that's right. The drummer didn't want to move with us, the drummer we had then. So... he was still in the band for a bit, but what was happening was we were jamming, and Julian, who was our percussionist, he would jump on the bass and Tim would jump on the kit, and that became the lineup then. But Julian was really he didn't really want to play bass because his brother, being one of the best and greatest bass players of all time, you know, kind of makes you maybe a little bit nervous. And it was funny though, because Julian, you know, he started being a bass player. Great feel. The Paladinos, the middle brother Mark, he's a drummer. Fantastic feel. I don't know where that feel kind of came from. Well, I do actually. The Paladinos were very, very into the Cardiff Bay scene way back before it all got developed. Tiger Bay and the scene down in Butetown, which was very much a kind of culture mash, you know, lots of, Caribbean and Asian influence, all sorts, you know, big melting pot, fantastic melting pot. And there were some clubs down there, this is way before my time, but Pino was really, you know, he was like the man, and, you know, the bass player, before he had his success, and was playing with a wonderful drummer called Aaron Amun. Aaron went on to be John Martin's drummer for a long time, well, up until John's sad passing. And there was a keyboard player that they would play with. So the three of them, they were like this kind of nucleus, and they would play with loads of people. But the keyboard player was called Richard Dunn, nicknamed Dickie Dunn, although he always hated that. But Richard was an absolute astounding musician, you know, the same kind of class as Pino and Aaron. And Richard became a really important part because Richard became kind of the band's producer, and we managed to kind of coerce him into playing keys with us. He went from us to being Van Morrison's keyboard player, so, you know, you know, it was really great. Anyway, we did a gig with Richard one night, still under the name of Drastic, and we played this song, Rocketgoldstar. It's got this belting chorus on it. I wonder if I could find the song for you. But after that gig, Richard said, "You know what? Drastic is a crap name. You should call yourselves Rocketgoldstar." And we're going, "We can't call ourselves Rocketgoldstar. That's one of our songs. You can't name yourself after one of your own songs. Or can you?" And I thought about it, and it was like, well, if you're going to name yourself after something, why don't you name yourself after one of the coolest motorbikes of all time? That's probably a very safe thing to name yourself after. And Rocketgoldstar, it's a mad powerful name. It's so cool. And we decided then we would do that. We decided to call ourselves that, and we decided to spell it without any spaces, like one word, Rocketgoldstar. And that was an idea, I think, of Frank's, because the internet, the World Wide Web, had just happened. This is another thing about Frank. Frank, in his family home, his parents were really involved in the development of networks, and in their basement in their house they had a huge network. So Frank was he knew about like the internet, which I think did that go live in the 1960s, but their house was a kind of conduit for essentially proto internet. So he was really up on all of this stuff. So we were really early kind of internet sort of users, I guess, through Frank. He really explained it to me, and that was one of the things, that if we left the spaces out of the name, then that word would be our word, even though they're three very common words just shoved together into a word which was ours. Most people always spelt it with rocket and a space, Goldstar, but really, it should really all be one word. Oh, someone's asking me, any Funkelbod videos out there? My God, I really wish there was. God. Do you know, I haven't even got any recordings of Funkelbod anymore. I'd love to hear that stuff again. Especially one particular track. We had some good tracks. We did have some good tracks, but this transition, though, from this funk band into this kind of thing, which was still a bit difficult to define, it happened at this sort of midpoint in the 90s, and living in this cottage in this kind of remote way, and listening to the records that we had. Frank had a bonkers record collection as well, vinyl record collection, and there was all sorts of interesting things in his collection, and some of really weird Duke Ellington stuff, and Stan Kenton, sort of what was it, sort of Rudiments of Rhythm or something like that. All kinds of weird stuff. But Frank had become an avid collector of KPM library records as well. The early 70s ones with the dark green covers, and with the most outstanding music on those KPM records. Holy cow. That was a huge influence on us, those KPM. And it still is. It still is. It's always there in our music. Spy themes. My goodness, spy theme type music was huge. God. And hearing Something Happened in 94 into 95, Portishead's Dummy album came out, which was really infused with that sort of spy vibe, that spy theme sort of music, and was the best thing. A couple of things in 94, 95, Portishead's Dummy, Beastie Boys' Ill Communication. I wonder which other ones. Radiohead in 95 and the Bends. These were all phenomenal, influential things on us. Beastie Boys was huge influence. In fact, the Beastie Boys, we'd got really into Beastie Boys around Check Your Head. The drummer who was in the band, Andy, he was an amazing guy, and had got into, he was one of the few people who kind of caught on how cool Paul's Boutique was, and introduced us to Check Your Head. I was really prejudiced against Beastie Boys. I thought of them as that bratty frat boy kind of annoying, thing that became really, their image after the License to Ill and all the crazy stuff that happened. But Check Your Head, and then so we were really primed and ready for Ill Communication, which was a stunning piece of work. And tunes like Sabotage, mixing with I just think of the tunes. But Sure Sharp, Flute Loop. Oh, there's loads of cool. Just what a brilliant record. But the other thing about that record, especially, was just the different music forms. How they could go from like a hardcore punk thing to like an instrumental, spy type thing, or just like a meters type kind of laid back kind of funk groove, to then something with lots of kind of shouty rap. And we had a song which was we had a few songs which were really heavily Beastie Boy influenced, and some of that crossed over then from our Funkelbod period and then into Rocketgoldstar. But yeah, enormous influence really on me and the band, and and a lot of our friends as well. That stuff was just it was just amazing. Another crucial and really highly underrated album from back then came from the Brand New Heavies, of all people, British acid jazz funk band. They went over to America, and I think maybe just over the course of a weekend did a bunch of jams with really great hip-hop artists, and this album was called The Heavy Rhyme Experience. And that was just one of those albums. I mean, this is maybe a bit more on the Funkelbod side of things, but what was brilliant about Heavy Rhyme Experience was it was like a live funk band just laying down meters type grooves or whatever, with live rapping over the top, which doesn't sound particularly revolutionary, but back then it really was. It really was, because that band was just cutting loose in the studio. And it was really improvised and a fantastic energy. Seriously urge anyone who's kind of interested in funky hip-hop-y kind of things, that album is blinding. And I think there's just a sense of great adventure, energy, excitement that's in that album that really is super cool. So that was hugely influential as well. Yeah, that was really the influential stuff on Funkelbod, but various ideas of that definitely carried through. Oh, so sorry, chatties. Tricky, Maxine K, yes. Yeah, and that was another one. That was another one that came out around then that was, again, just like, God, I mean, it was just like anything, just like absolutely anything, and pull it together, and, it's a really cool time. Just backtracking a teeny bit, though, to the kind of rave thing, something major happened in 1994, which was awful. And that was the introduction in the UK of the Criminal Justice Bill. This was a deliberate, pernicious, nasty, we had a horrible government. Sound familiar? A horrible government who was just hell-bent on sort of quashing this kind of, they saw this thing as a real threat, the whole kind of rave thing. So there was, the Criminal Justice Bill was, had this kind of ridiculous, repetitive beats law, which meant that if more than 10 people are gathered together in any place listening to music with repetitive beats, the police could come in and confiscate all the equipment without any, it didn't need any warrant. They could just come in and do it. And that sort of massively affected me. I didn't want to lose, my PA was like really important for my band. So I didn't want my PA to be used for these parties anymore, because I just couldn't afford it to lose it, But you see, the stupid thing about this Criminal Justice Bill was it pushed the raves into clubland and into the hands of the gangsters, who kind of controlled it ever since. It was everything changed. And a lot of that beautiful burgeoning sort of like new agey, I don't know want to call it new agey, but it really was almost feeling like this incredible sort of spiritual awakening that a lot of us were going through. I don't know. It lost. I mean, that was really infused with a lot of the naivety and excitement of us. It all became. I don't know. The money people get their hands on it. The thugs and the gangsters are going. Hang on, we can control this now. That's just such a shame. So there's this definite sort of period where in 1994 a lot of the kind of cool things had sort of been really severely damaged by this new law, terrible law. So that kind of coincided with us moving into the mountain and going through our own musical changes anyway. But musically, though, that's, this really interesting thing had happened then. So by about 95, there was incredible different music going on. And of course, in Britain, a huge thing happened in 95, which was almost a counter reaction to the rave thing. And that was Britpop, which was this kind of retro, guitar-y, jingle-jangly music that was, influenced by Beatles and the Kinks and that sort of stuff. You all know what Britpop is. But it sort of also coincided with, like, lads magazines like Loaded, people starting drinking beer from bottles, like little beer bottles rather than your traditional British pint. And that was like a move away from a more hippie kind of free-flowing thing that had happened a few years earlier. It's sort of, those of us who were part of that thing could kind of see this stuff happening or a little bit, However, there was some good parts of it. 95 was quite an amazing year in a way because that was, because of this explosion of Britpop, it did actually put music very much back into the kind of headlines again. Oasis, I always call them the wrong band at the right time. I always thought Oasis were dreadful. Really dreadful. I still do, I was in a band. I just thought, what they're doing is just so dull. Oh my goodness. I distinctly remember being in a party around 95 and I think Verve had broke big. Maybe it's 96 at the time, but I remember being in a party and seeing someone strumming The Drugs Don't Work by the Verve, which, I mean, the Verve had some qualities, but man, their songs in the wrong hands could be deathly dull. Oh, and then the stinker that is Wonderwall. Oh man, people were playing it all over the place. And I was like, everyone, you've got it wrong. This isn't a classic song. There's a great verse. There's a real promise in the verse. There's something about it. And then it goes, like a dirge. A terrible song. And I was like thinking, oh no, people love this. I found it difficult to see any positives in it because I just thought it was awful. And this was also compounded by the fact I got to know the producer, Owen Morris, and he was horrible. He was an arrogant, horrible man. I really didn't like him. It's very rare for me to not like someone. He was horrible. I think he was, Ian Tyndale saying used to listen to Chris Morris in the evenings on BBC Radio. That is a fantastic thing to mention because that does tie in with the point. Jam, Blue Jam rather. Radio 1, Chris Morris, obviously Brass Eye and the Day to Day, and amazing guy, had a radio show on Radio 1 that was a real melting pot. He was really into a lot of this same sort of Aphex Twin-esque, whatever it's called. So he would be playing tunes like that, interspersed with just the weirdest, surreal and dark comedy. The fact it was on Radio 1 now, when I think back at it, is just an astonishing thing. Really urge, if you haven't ever listened to those Blue Jams. Blue Jam did make the transition after Brass Eye. Brass Eye, I think, is the greatest comedy of all time, in my opinion. It's like a spoof of a serious news kind of thing. Although nowadays, what would be a kind of thing on Brass Eye or the day-to-day has been kind of reality. Ah! But that stuff, that was happening around the same time. So there was it was a very interesting, there was such a lot of interesting stuff going on. And a lot of this was absolutely influencing us. My goodness, I think we should have I think it's probably time for a song. This is all my preamble. I meant to do this in 10 minutes. I thought I'll just do a 10-minute little bit of waffle just to kind of set the scene, and then we can start having a listen to some of the tunes once I've contextualized it. Ballroom's asking me to sing Wonderwall again because that was very touching. Oh. This is funny because who was it? Mike Pops? Was it Mike Flowers? Mike Flowers came out with a cover version of Wonderwall around this Britpop era, and it was all done in a very kind of kitschy sort of way, a little bit like the early Divine Comedy stuff, you know, but really played in a very kitschy way. Much better version of the song. But yeah, incredibly kitsch, but yeah, much better. So, okay, I'm going to try and speed things up a little bit. There's some super cool things, though, that happened. Perhaps, if you're all right, perhaps I just do it. Maybe we'll have a song, and then I'll come back and I'll carry on the story. So, I think what I'll do then is I will... Right, let's have a little look here. Okay, this little project here is a little mastering project. Well, I say mastering, I'm just sort of making this in Cubase. I typically master in Studio One, it's kind of convenient, but I was doing sort of experimental stuff with this. Now, in the video that I made of the Silver Bullet, from a company called Louder Than Liftoff, physical rack unit for analogizing digital recordings, that's its kind of thing. When I fed some of these tunes, I fed all of the tunes that we had through that device, it made it sound like a record. It really did. All the songs, because these songs have been recorded in different places and over an extraordinarily long time period. However, putting it through the Silver Bullet has kind of given a uniformity, a texture and tone to the tracks. Part of the reason why I'm doing this tonight is some friends from were talking to me yesterday about this stuff and asked me what's the state of play with this Rocketgoldstar album. And I've got some quite embarrassing thing to admit in a moment. And I was like, I don't actually know. And then I remembered Frank, who's still in the band to this day. That was something I was going to lead on to, but Frank, he lives in Cardiff. I live in Bristol. He'd come over to work with me compiling this album, and we needed another session to finish it, and then COVID lockdown came, and it really sort of took the wind out of our sails, really. We were just in this kind of final stretch of getting it ready for release, and that's kind of where it is. But all of the tunes are done. There's no reason to not release it now. So I'm going to talk to the guys, and we're going to set a release date, hopefully in April. I think that's when we're going to hopefully do it. And long-term fans of the band will go, my God, it's taken you 20 years to do a follow-up album to our last one, which came out in 2001. And that's an astonishing thing when I think about it. But the cupboard is far from bare. We've got about 3 albums. So we've got lots of material. So I'm really keen to see if this stuff, if some people actually take a liking to it, then that'll probably encourage us to kind of look what else we've got there and, maybe look to do some more releases. But so the first song I'm going to play is going to be the song that we've picked to be the opener for this album. And it's called Kitty. Now I'm going to play it. I'm going to play the file. I'm going to play is it's not like it's a semi-finished master in terms of it's been fed through the silver bullet. Let's just have a look. Actually, just remind myself of what's going on. Gosh, hang about. Oh, I might play this from a folder instead, actually, just because I'm looking at, there's a whole load of stuff going on here. I'm going to bypass them. Let's just take all of that out. Yeah, so I'm just going to play it, which is, so what we're going to hear is the unmastered mix that's been fed through the silver bullet, which has done a really great job of adding, like knitting it all together and giving it like this edge. What it will need to do then is go through a final stage of mastering where it's all kind of leveled and maybe boosted up a little bit. But anyway, let's play it and let's see. I'm hoping that the sound quality will be okay. Okay, so I'm going to let it play. It's quite a long tune. So should we play the whole song or should we play a sample of it? I kind of want to play the whole song because it will kind of show a little bit about how our songs are structured, or rather well, they are very structured, but yeah, I'm going to play the whole song. Why not? I'm going to chat in the chat room.
Save all the gentle ones, hold their hearts, and try to have fun. And if they ever change, write their names and say, follow me. Kitty, oh kitty, lost your claws on the apple tree. Won't you come back to me? Leave your mark on the apple tree.
yeah. What do you think about that? So, Kitty, meow. Yeah. Oh, nice comments. Oh, Cardiacs would love it. Oh, yeah, a bit of Cardiac. Although, to be honest, I think Cardiacs are an influence, but we were doing similar things to Cardiacs before we'd actually ever heard Cardiacs. So we were definitely a band that was going along a similar path. I think I need to fast forward a little bit. Just that Rocketgoldstar essentially became a three-piece band, and Julian, Palladino, and Tim, they left the band in '98, and Sean Organ joined the band in '99. There was a tiny crossover period where Tim was still in the band, so we were a four-piece for a short time, but we became a three-piece in 1999. So Sean, he's the new boy. He's only been in the band for 20 years, 22 years. But what you heard in that song, for instance, is the three vocalists. So all three of us sing. I was just trying to sing. I was trying to point out a few bits where I was singing. And across this album, the different vocalists come into play. I typically, the singing, the sort of singing that I do, I'm sort of belter. I sing the high bits. Some people, say a little bit like Freddie Mercury in times. I mean, that's way not deserved, but just, a little bit more like that. The lead vocal that you heard in the most in that one was Frank's voice. He's got this amazing kind of gravelly, odd voice. Really different from mine. And Sean has got kind of the loveliest voice, the drummer. I say the drummer, but Sean guitar, and I've got so many stories to tell about this band. Oh, it's a funny band. But really, when Sean joined, that's when the band became something that was very unique. I think we'd really kind of become something. And Sean just, I think with him being such a great singer and a fantastic harmonizer, his vocal harmonies are really interesting. He writes beautiful harmony vocal parts that move in really interesting ways and brought another dimension in, which was fantastic. So that song there, Kitty, when... most of these songs, in fact, all of the songs on the album are recorded as a three-piece with some judicious overdubs here and there. But in the most, it's three-piece rock. It's three-piece rock, really. Frank, he would multitask. He'd play guitar and he plays keys. And sometimes he would do that at the same time. He would be chomping chords with his left hand and playing keys with his right hand and singing at the same time and doing his effects. Ridiculous. Incredible musician. I wouldn't do an awful lot of multitasking. I would be singing and playing bass, which is kind of hard enough anyway. But Sean would also sing. And back in 1999, once we'd this new lineup was starting to kind of really, we were starting to really get it together as this new lineup. I had this idea, which I thought was a really fun idea, and that was for us to all wear headsets. Now, the headset microphone was utterly the realm of the boy band, and seeing like when we traipse onto stage with all three of us wearing headset mics, that kind of stuff gets the audience's kind of backs up a little bit, especially the flipping indie schmindy crowd, who I really have got major issues with, the indie schmindy lot, because they championed some absolutely dross, really terrible music. There was almost this thing of like, oh, if you say this, as if you're influenced by this, and if your music is kind of in really, really tightly defined, then we'll let you in. But if you try and sort of cross the streams, then this is kind of like a post Britpop thing. I was mentioning earlier about this amazing thing around 95 and just before. but I think it kind of closed back down again by around 2000. And yeah, Travis, Radiohead begat Travis, begat Coldplay. And that was, I think in many ways, I believe that Kid A by Radiohead was them atoning for sort of what they had created, in their legacy. Bands like Embrace and, Coldplay. I'm sorry, this is not my favourite music. I love Radiohead, and actually Kid A was amazing, but, that kind of angsty sort of minor key rock, The Bends and Jeff Buckley Grace, really, those two albums just had an enormous effect, and a lot of bands really sort of became bands in that ilk. And we were playing gigs with, I can't remember if we played with Coldplay, but we were certainly playing around we were on the same sort of plateau as Coldplay around this time. So actually, I'm jumping forward a little bit, 2000, 2001. I'll come more onto that in a moment. But the more things were going down one way, we were going really in this other direction. And, the prog rock kind of influences, which I was bringing a lot of, actually Sean and Frank also, it kind of worked with their kind of creative spark, was thoroughly unpopular. Or what prog rock had become, modern prog rock was very Dream Theater and metally, like a metally sort of proggy sort of thing. Not a big fan, really, of that kind of thing. I was really interested in Gentle Giant and King Crimson and Van de Graaff Generator, all sorts of awesome stuff from that, that time that has kind of really nothing to do with a lot of that modern-y sort of, things like the Porcupine Tree and what they did. It was all kind of good, but it was a little bit, I don't know, a bit too asinine for my taste. I just like spiky stuff. I kind of like, that's why band like Cardiac's super appealed, where you kind of mix like a punk aesthetic with a prog rock aesthetic, and then there's the most awful music term in history, prog and punk. And Cardiac's, they would hate being called prog. I don't think anyone would particularly like to be described as prog. Yes. Okay. So I'm going to move on to the next song. So I will contextualize historically some of these songs a little bit as well. But actually, before I do that, I'm just going to show one thing. I'm just going to nip back in this song here to where that little break comes in. I just want to tell you what's going on here from the previous song. Where is that moment? Oh, here we go. The keyboard you can hear in the background there, that's a Baldwin electric harpsichord with a Perspex lid, red underneath, and is one of the coolest instruments, I don't think there's any like VST. To be honest, on these Rocketgoldstar songs, all of the keyboard sounds that you'll hear are played on the real instruments, vintage instruments, and I'm going to talk about our producer who worked with us on a lot of these tracks. He's a guy called Thiepol Sandra, or Tim Lewis. Oh, I don't know. Sorry, Tim. I'm not sure if I think it's widely known that Tim Lewis is Thiepol Sandra, but Thiep, as we like to call him, he was in Spiritualized at the time. He was the keyboard player in Spiritualized, a very successful British band, and he really kind of took us under his wing, really. And he's got an incredible collection of synths, and so he produced that last song that we just heard, and we'd go and record with him, and we would have full range of, we would have full access to his stunning. It's pretty much complete in terms of he's got all the classics, you know, he's got an incredible giant collection, but with all the classics, from Mellotrons to VCS3s to Polymoog, and it's an incredible collection of stuff. Amazing person, amazing musician, amazing ideas, radical guy. But it was great because also a huge prog fan, so he really kind of indulged us in many ways. But yeah, I'll point out on the songs various instruments. But yeah, I don't think there's any VSTs on any of this stuff. And as I say, the core, all the tracks are recorded as essentially as a 3-piece. And there are a few videos of us on YouTube and, you know, playing this stuff kind of live. And as I say, you'll see it swaps around quite a bit, you know. Harry Turner Project's first Hawkwind gig was a Black Sword tour in the early 80s. The Chronicles of the Black Sword was my first Hawkwind album, actually. I loved it. There's some great keyboard tracks on that, some amazing sort of synthy space stuff. Really cool. Julian Cope has been mentioned. Yes, Thighpaul Sandra. He was also Julian Cope's producer as well. So, and through him, got to meet and got to know Julian a little bit, who is one of the most extraordinary people I've ever met. Brett Lemmings is saying Spectrasonics has that electric harpsichord in Keyscape. How cool. Yeah. You know, I was mentioning there's no VSTs. That's not a diss on VSTs or in fact using VSTs. It's more of it was more, you know, if you've got access to the real thing, you're going to use it, you know. But I think you may have heard it in that last song as well. The stuff is kind of fairly kind of raw. It's kind of electric. It's, you know, it's non-click based. You know, this is, we'd record largely without clicks, and we would rehearse tempo ramps and tempo sort of slowdowns, and my goodness, that's a tricky thing to do in a live band, to drop together, say 20 BPM, or to go up in tempo, but certainly playing at a tempo and then on a bar drop collectively down to another tempo, to a different tempo. You know, I'd say without clicks, it would have been really difficult to make clicks work with a lot of this stuff. But in a way, this was what we really wanted to capture with this particular band, because this really unique pulling and pushing and kind of quirky approach to songwriting. You know, it's kind of good to kind of keep all of that tempo fluctuation in. So anyway, I'm going to move on to another song. Some of you may have heard this next one because I made a video to it a couple of, when was it, maybe last year or the year before. The song is called Fabulous Logic, and let me find it. Here it is. And it's a bit, this is slated to be second. I might move it later to be like a bit. I'm thinking now of it being second to last song now, so we'll see. I'm not sure if I'm going to get through the entire album, but we'll see how we get on. But yeah, let's give this one a go. It's a bit of an. I'm on lead vocals on this one. Here we go.
Who talked about TFLA? Teachers, fabulous logic. Who thought about TFLA? Teachers, fabulous logic. Who talked about TFLA? Teachers, fabulous logic. Who thought about TFLA? Teachers, fabulous logic. I'm making the same mistakes, but my babe, I got my mugshot, and that's okay. I'm thinking what is good, but my babe has got the motion, and I am through.
Alrighty. Just thought I'd flick up this. This is the new thing called Supervision in Cubase. I talk about this in the Sonic State review I've recently done. But part of the reason I was showing it, though, just to kind of measure the kind of luffs on it, and just trying to adapt to this loudness unit business. But typically, when you try and, the guides, really people trying to get you to go in between -12, -14 luffs, and you can see that I think is kind of quite loud, and that's pre kind of adding extra gain on, which obviously with a limiter, I use Ozone 8, you can whatever version it is, Ozone 9, you can really add stupendous amounts of extra gain. Anyway, that song, Jazz Fingers going, does it frustrate you when people say you sound like blah blah, or does it inspire you? I think it's absolutely, I find myself doing it, it's a point of reference. When you hear something, you need to kind of maybe find some way to compartmentalize it, just to kind of understand it a little bit. So I think it's something that we all do. I'm always interested to see what people think it sounds like, and I'm always happy for influences to be kind of all present and correct, really. But about that song, one interesting thing worth mentioning, I think, is that's that same Hammond that we bought way back in the mid-90s, the L100 with a Leslie, and that Hammond is very dominant as the instrument. There's no guitar on that song at all. It's all Hammond and distorted bass. But one thing that I did on that one, which I thought was quite fun, I might show you that. I might just play that bit again, just so you can hear it. And in the solo, I found that the keyboard solo, it sounded a bit. It was great, but I just wanted it to have a little difference. So I used the. Gosh, it was done a while ago, when Ableton had that ability to go to detect you can extract a MIDI from audio, and you've got the different ways you can get, take a melody or a bass line. So I tried to extract the melody, and that's a monophonic process from the Hammond. So let's find that solo, and then I fed that MIDI out and through. I think it was an Alesis Micron of all things. It's a cool little synth that. Let me find the solo. Oh yeah. So essentially, what you hear is the Micron playing notes that were derived from the Hammond, but the Hammond was playing polyphonically, but it could only, this MIDI extraction would only take a monophonic extraction. So it was almost just taking little parts of the Hammond, and then, so yeah, have a listen to that. I thought it came out quite interesting. Hammond, here it comes in now, here. That sounds cool, doesn't it? But I mean, it literally, underneath that synth line is the Hammond. He was playing it chords and the melody, and it managed to. I think I had to tweak the MIDI a little bit, fed it out through the Micron, and then, did a few little tweaks on it. Yeah. But again, that's like Hammond organ, bass guitar, drums, vocals, and a smattering of a few little overdubs. Overdubs wise, we typically would put like some tambourine and some shakers on things, pretty inconsequential stuff. But it was always important for us to be a three-piece band, and for the music, for it really to be this interaction of three people playing together. Thank you. Nice comments. Have I still got the stems? For some of them. Yeah, I might have the stems for that one. Not for some of the others. Some stuff is lost. Hey, Dan Moore in the chat room again. Hey, Dan. Dan from Modulus 3. Another call out. Amazing. One of my favourite current bands. That's cool to see you. Thanks, Singdalian, saying favourite Gaz track, I think. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing as well, isn't it? When you come to sort of playlist, you know, when you come to put an album order together, that's a really enjoyable thing. I've worked on literally, I would say, I used to keep an online tally of all the records that I've worked on and mastered or produced or been involved in the production of. I remember by about 2010, I'd worked on about 200 commercial releases, so it's probably quite a lot more than that. But in doing that, especially mastering, I've mastered so many albums. Some of those albums have come in with very specific running orders. Sometimes it's during the mastering process itself that changing a running order, you know, messing around with a running order and exploring stuff, the way things can go, often with, if it be the client with me or remotely, or, discussing it. But the actual playlisting of tracks that's an art in itself, really, and a lot of fun. I really enjoy that side of things, trying to sort of approach it a little bit like a narrative across all of the songs. Well, I would like to talk a little bit at some point. I think I might make a separate stream about it, but we released an album back in 2001 called Soft Eject, Rocketgoldstar Soft Eject, and that album I am so utterly in love with. It's one of my proudest things I've ever been involved in, but there's so much to that story. So I think I will do a separate Soft Eject broadcast, maybe to coincide with the 20th anniversary of it, which it will be this year. But anyway, I'll keep with this one. Oh, my last track vocals reminded the original synth of Ian Gillan. Yeah, I'll take that. Okay, thank you for the comments. Thank you for the positivity. This is great. Okay, I'm really enjoying this. I hope this is okay for you all. I mean, it's, as I say, I was inspired to do this from a conversation from yesterday, and literally friends just going, "Why not put it out? It's taken you 20 years to get this stuff together. Come on, put it out." Okay, let's move on to another song, because I like the stories that the songs kind of have in them. Gosh, I can't remember what's third on the track and the running order now. Okay, let's go Mimesis. Wow. Okay, this song now has never ever been heard in public ever. So this will be quite an interesting one. This has got some terrific R2600, courtesy of Thibault Sandra, in the middle section. And it sounds intense. I mean, it sounds really intense. This one is, we've layered a few things on this one. Although at its core, it's still very much the three-piece. This song was recorded in a beautiful studio, sadly defunct now, called Loco, which was just north of Caerleon in South Wales. Loco was a bit of a legendary studio in its own right. Lots of hits and things are done there. A lot of the Stone Roses' famous and not that great second album, The Second Coming, was done there. Roll With It by aforementioned rubbish band Oasis was also recorded there. But also metal, so Thibault Sandra, Tim Lewis, he was quite often the kind of house engineer and producer there, and a lot of Levelers of bands recorded there, and also sort of like metal bands like Bolt Thrower would record there, and loads of people. It eventually became owned by Jeff Downes from the band Asia, and previously the Buggles, and currently the keyboard player in Yes, a role he's held before, back in 1980, when Trevor Horn, of all people, took over from John Anderson, and Jeff Downes took over from Rick Wakeman for Ill-Fated Drama Tour. Great album, Drama by Yes, but the tour, the fans were really upset about these new interlopers. But Trevor left the band as a producer, as a singer, but returned as a producer, and with that very successful 90125 album with Owner of a Lonely Heart and It Changes and all those great tracks. But anyway, Jeff Downes and John Payne, who was the then current bass player singer of Asia, had taken over the running of Loco, pretty much ran it into the ground, I think. Yeah, Jazz Finger is asking about these tracks and play all the tracks live or have I soaked them in overdubs. Yeah, no, they are live. They're all live core tracks with some overdubs. As I say, this next one that I'm going to play is has some overdubs. Again, it's guitar, bass and drums. The bass I used on this. I've been showing this bass, by the way, just when I've been using this bass on the tracks we've heard so far. This is my Rickenbacker 4004 with some proper wear. I tell you what, when this bass was new, it was beautiful. And after the first gig, there was a big, horrible mark there from my thumb and just grinded. So that's... But this is quite a rare Rickenbacker. But I used this on the majority of the tracks, I think. Tim is ace, says Dan. Yes, he is. Oh, I'm glad you know him. Oh no, Inky saying Second Coming is only CD allowed in the car. There is some great stuff. In fact, I mentioned Thibault Sandra. Is it 10-Story Love Song or something? There's that intro with the synths, and Thibault Sandra did that. And actually, to be fair, there is some great stuff on it. I think it's the Ian Brown sort of... I think he kind of struggled a bit with that more heavier rock. John Squire, what a remarkable guitarist he is. I think he's amazing and really versatile. A very quick aside about the Stone Roses. I was fortunate enough to see them in Japan back in 2012, I think it was. Because the Stone Roses had not played live for years and years and years. And then the original and much loved lineup with Rennie, Manny, Ian Brown and John Squire reformed. And this was a really highly anticipated return of Stone Roses. And they were playing on the main stage in Fuji Rock, a stage that I was to play on the next year, which I wouldn't have believed if you'd have told me that the year before. But when they played on Fuji Rock, I was like, "Oh, this is cool." They're not using any backing tracks; they're just raw and live. And I really enjoyed it, actually. I really enjoyed it. And I thought John Squire just sounded incredible on that gig. But anyway, I went after the gig and sort of met up with some people and they're going, "Oh my God, didn't the Roses sounded awful. They sounded so unrehearsed. They sounded really..." And my takeaway from that was, my goodness, a lot of their contemporaries would be augmenting their sound with loads of backing tracks, backing vocals, extra guitars and all this kind of stuff. Something that really rankles me. I don't like backing tracks used with a traditional rock band. I think it's cheating. I think it's bull crap. I really don't like it. I think some music, you have to embrace that kind of thing because it's impossible to do it in a kind of meaningful live way. Band like Cardiacs would use backing tracks for certain things that literally they couldn't really do it live without. But when a band is using it to sort of kind of pretend they're better than they are, and that's what a lot of bands use backing tracks to do, like the lead vocalist struggles. See, once you've got those tracks, if you've got those tracks running, then a couple of things happen. You can put all sorts of stuff onto them and the audience doesn't need to know. So if the singer struggles on a chorus, they'll put the chorus from a stem on and the singer will mime. In fact, you see this is something to watch out for. You see, for many years, everyone was hush-hush in the industry about just how much backing tracks were being used with these kind of rock bands. and you weren't really meant to talk out about it. I talk about it. Call them out. I think it's, I think bands should have to declare they're using backing tracks so people understand. But I remember I interviewed 2 girls after a gig. I think it might have been a Snow Patrol gig or something like that, and asked them what they thought about the gig, and they loved the gig. And I said, how would you feel if I told you that a number of the things that you heard tonight wasn't actually being played live, was coming off backing tracks? They kind of looked at each other and they weren't bothered. They had a lovely time. They were singing along and dancing, and they loved it. So I was thinking, okay, this is me being old-fashioned. I just love the notion of a band who are utterly, utterly, utterly reliant on each other to do the same, to bring the music, that if one of the players kind of falls over, the music will fall over. But that's the thing with backing tracks. So, you can kind of lose your place, come back in, and the music doesn't tank. It just keeps on going. Like, from a bass playing point of view, it really feels like you're kind of rendered fairly impotent with backing tracks, because it's like, so when I want to push forward and like drive it along a little bit, or pull it back and sit it back a little bit, you can't. You're just kind of on this rigid, predefined path. You can never have a truly transcendental gig. You can only have a kind of adequately performed gig, because the backing track acts as a kind of an anchor that prevents the music from, just being able to move and react, and that's one of my real gripes about it. They've got no excuse now. Ableton 11 has a tempo follow function, which will follow the drummer. So, bands who want to use arpeggiators and fantastic and sequencers and all that kind of good stuff, which I love, can do it, and the drummer can be in control of the tempo, so can speed up and slow things down. There's a great band called The Egg, who Dan certainly knows. Bristolish, London, sort of legendary dance band, really. But what makes them legendary was, I think they were one of the very first bands I ever saw who were like a proper kind of band in the traditional sense, but playing full-on dance music to a load of to the raving hordes. But for many years, Math Scott, the incredible drummer, has been using a third-party solution. So he'd be running Ableton for a lot of this stuff, but it would follow him. So I think that stuff is great, though, because it kind of it brings the best of both worlds in. We all love electronic music and the facility that it allows us to do and everything like that. But to be able to then have it move and follow the beautiful undulations of tempo and the excitement that puts into the music, In fact, you can hear a lot of music which is super click track, rigid tempo, which starts at the same tempo, ends at the same tempo. That's dominated music for the last 30 years or so. It really feels like static when you listen to beautiful like Motown, soul music, funk, groovy music from days gone by. It still sounds awesome now, but like music which is really shackled to a rigid, non-moving, fixed time, but that kind of works with like certain dance music. You want it to be utterly like that, sort of like that kind of Kraftwerkian sort of principle. But I'd be interested to know how much tempo drift there is on those kind of classic old Kraftwerk tracks. Interesting. That's something to investigate. But so I think now the technology has kind of caught up to allow the transfer of power from the metronome back to the musician. So that's quite exciting, So Ableton 11, just fresh out. I'm going to be really curious to see which bands and, which acts kind of really embrace that functionality. Andrew Brooks is saying in the late 80s there was a box called the Russian Dragon, as in rushing and dragging, that was supposed to take a live played groove and send out alternating MIDI clock. I have heard of that. So interestingly, that thing was certainly something people were aware of for a very long time. But I guess with it being sort of a standard feature in Ableton Live going forward from version 11, I think that might be the first time that a real mainstream solution for that has been available. So yeah. So that's an interesting thing. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next song, and let's have a little think about which one. Oh, I know what's next. Some of you may be familiar with this song as well, but there's an interesting, well, semi-interesting story to it. Let me find it. So the next song is called Born Taurus Man. I used this song. We revisited it for a review that I was doing for a Steinberg audio interface. So some of you may have seen that. But the kind of thing which is kind of curious about this is we recorded this new version of it. I'm just trying to find which is the right version. I've got two versions of it here now. We recorded a new version of it, and I presumed that the new version was the one that was going to make the cut for the album. But Sean, the drummer, he turned around and said, "No, we should use the original." I wasn't even sure if the original was a demo or not. We'd sort of recorded it well, but I don't know if I'd ever necessarily thought about it as like the kind of finished thing. But this is quite interesting when you then redo a song and you go back and you do it at a higher fidelity and better quality, more, mics and whatnot. If it lacks a certain something, and I think the word mojo is probably a good one to use here. It is a sort of almost indefinable thing, but something like the vibe, the feel, or just the mood that the song's got. We've decided to go with that original version rather than the newer, higher quality version. I wonder, I could maybe play you Atomic Tom. Oh, he loves this song. He tried to cover it, but my vocal range exceeded his. Wow. Okay. Yeah, I practiced this I did practice the vocals on this one quite a bit. In fact, we were recording it in Cardiff, and I was driving back and forth from Bristol, and I would just be singing it full belt in my car all the way there. So anyone see me driving along, I'd be driving my car. Because I sing full range, and I sing full kind of, sort of chest voice as well in a lot of this stuff, trying to, and in order to get the high pitches, I have to belt it out at really ridiculously loud. Otherwise I can't get my voice to go up and hold the pitch unless I'm really giving it a lot of gusto. And I've always struggled with that live, that I often over-sing live, and I sing too aggressively I sing too loud. And, that is an issue that I always have. I remember hearing a few years ago, Marvin Gaye learned, I think around the time just before he recorded the seminal What's Going On, someone told him that, you don't need to sing loud. You can sing really soft, and the microphone will do all the work for you. Let the microphone, let the mic do the job. You can sing much softer. And so that's quite an interest. If you know that album, it's quite an interesting thing, because if you hear his earlier stuff, I'm going classic, heard it through the grapevine and stuff, he really is coming much more from a louder place. But, What's Going On has got this much more softer, laid back vocal approach. He subsequently explored that a lot on the albums around that time. But, that's kind of a cool thing. Well, I was talking a little bit about mics, though. Just briefly, before I do the song, let's hear it then, says Andrew Jones. This is a Lewitt LCT 640, wonderful mic, loads of great features on there. But when if you're a vocalist and you're exploring a mic maybe that you're not familiar with, then a good thing to do is just to really start to understand the tonal pickup of the mic. And I'll show you on this one here, is that I've actually got it as a hypercardioid pickup at the moment, typically because I'm a little bit further back from the mic. Well, perhaps not so much now. In fact, I'm just going to switch the polar pattern so it is just cardioid, because it gets the best sort of tone, I think. But this is something to do, is just to kind of learn where the nulls are. So the cardioid position, they call it cardioid because it's kind of like a heart shape. But when you go into a microphone, and I'm just going to go learning where the proximity is. Seeing where the tone. And what you start to notice with mics is that there are different frequencies available. Now, this is something that John Lennon would do a lot of. He would explore a microphone, and when he would sing, he would use his position around the microphone as a way of getting different tonal effects. Also, he would do things like he was really sensitive to sibilance. So if he knew there was a lot of sibilances, he would wave his hand in front of his mouth if it's to break the airflow, to kind of stop the sibilance kind of overloading the diaphragm. And so he was really very much a great explorer of the tonal qualities of mics. And he didn't like the sound of his own voice, so I guess he was really keen to find ways to exploit kind of microphones certain quirks. But yeah, so you kind of move around, like you can kind of come in, like if you're coming in from the side here, hey da da day, hey da day, da 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 da day. You can get it kind of like a kind of clearer, more sort of middly sound over here, and you can go right in there for the lovely bass, or come out, for a bass. And so yeah, so a kind of cool thing. Jazzfinger says it's shaped more like an arse than a heart, the cardioid. Yeah. Arseoid. An arseoid position. Yes, I like that. Right, okay, let's go on to the song. And what I think I might do is I might play you some of both, just to contrast a few things with this song, then, to show you some of the good bits and some of the, some of the reasons why we decided then to go back to the old original version. Gosh, I don't know if I'm going to get through the whole album here. This is taking ages. Oh, God. I'm such a waffle merchant. Right. Okay. So the song's called Born Taurus Man. So this song, some people liken it to Queen, and I understand that. I think that's a very kind of, I think that's quite an obvious influence on this one, but it wasn't initially intended to be that, but it sort of kind of ended up, once the harmonies went on there, it took quite Queen-like qualities. Let me see. That's the new one. So I'll find the old one. Should have labelled it a bit better, really. Okay, here we go. I'll explain a little bit about the piano after as well, because it's quite quirky.
Born Taurus Man, grafting on the farm, winter calling me to arms, marching through the fields, heading off to rock, raindrops change the earth to mark. Still we carry on, feet frozen to the bone. When will
broken down. Silence, yet I hear a sound. Angels open up the sky and lead me through the open door.
Taurus Man was born to blend, bred as an automaton, served without a question, while now blankly stares out at the sky.
Alrighty. So yeah. Oh, look at the lovely things in the chat room. Thank you, everyone. And makes me. Yeah, I'm quite emotional about things. Really, this stuff it's been like my dream. I don't know. This music, I was so obsessed with my band. It was my life. I didn't really do anything pretty much outside of it, really. Certainly until the early 2000s, I started getting into producing other people. But and then actually, that's something that sort of scuppered the band in many ways. Is that Frank and Sean both got into producing other people too, until we were just so busy producing other people. It was just, it's harder to find the time and the kind of drive that we had. And we'd had this kind of taste of things. We'd had a record deal and management and and various things getting collected to be taken to gigs. That kind of stuff is really nice, and it's a bit of a come down to lose that stuff. But anyway, a song like that song there, I mean, I'm really proud of that one, and I think it's a bit more traditional in some respects than some of the other stuff, but it's I think there's a lot of hallmarks of kind of classic stuff in there. But I said I would talk about the piano a little bit, and so in Frank's living room, he's got this old upright piano. I mean, I don't know if it's a particular special one, but he's learnt to tune it. He's bought all the right tools, and he'd had it tuned professionally a few times, but now he kind of tunes it himself. But he meticulously multi-sampled it, and then did he use a multi-sample? Yeah, he created a patch in his V-Synth GT. I mean, I'm trying to think how many multi-samples you could have on a V-Synth GT. But so he'd play his own upright piano on the V-Synth. But I think it was, I'm pretty sure it was on that. When we redid it, we used the same piano, but the actual piano rather than the multi-sampled version. We added lots more kind of textures and various things, but essentially this following very, very much along the same lines. And it's a richer, deeper kind of sound, but it kind of lacks something. I wonder if I can find that. But I'm going to try. I'm going to ask the other two, and we're going to try and see if we can have like an April release date for this album. So I will mention it again. So, if you do like it, and can help let other people know who may like it. I mean, I'm imagining most people won't like it, but I imagine some people will really like it. And I think it's probably better to be really liked by just a few people than sort of just like, yeah, it's okay by lots of people, Maybe being hated by more people. That if more people hate it than like it, then that's also kind of good. If, rather than people being indifferent to it. Yeah. So I think how many songs left is there? Let's just have a little look, because I've been on for quite a while now, and I don't want to overstay my welcome. If you're enjoying this and think it's okay, then I'll carry on. I mean, I intended to get to play all the tunes. let me see. So I've got my favourite one. I would like to play my favourite one. And 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. I think there's 4 more. Yeah, there's 4 more. Yeah, Inverted Popes who say carry on, Gaz, loving it. All right then. Oh, I'd like to get through the whole thing if I may. This is utterly. Is this utterly self-indulgent, just waffling on about my band and playing tunes, or I think it's okay. We're all friends here. But it does mean a lot to me, and I think why it's taken such a long time for us to actually get around to putting these songs out was for a while we were really treating them as our premium material, and we didn't want to just sort of have to go and do like a self-release. We were holding out for someone from a record company to miraculously out of the blue turn up and say, do you know what, I want to release that for you. Even though we didn't tell anyone we had it, just like a genie appear and go, I want to put it, because we weren't actively chasing sort of a record deal. We'd had that experience. And I think our record company experience, there were some good bits in it, but also, a record company wants something that they can market, something that they can target an audience. I think possibly these days the audience is probably a little bit easier to find for this kind of music than it was certainly back in around 2000, because we were starting to really diversify with this material to 2001. So we'd be playing gigs along the same sort of lines that Muse and Coldplay. We were on the same scene as them, and Snow Patrol, and like those bands all went off to be mega, but we kind of went in the exact opposite direction. Dice Stanton is saying, saw Rocketgoldstar at the Carmarthen Festival at Port Talbot. Yes, on the Welsh Riviera. That's a very nice way to describe Port Talbot. Carmarthen. Oh, sorry, Inky, I'm waffling too much. Oh, thanks. Yeah. Sync Dalian saying it's okay. This is the Gaz Williams show after all. Yes. The clue is in the title, isn't it? All right. Okay. I said I was going to play some of the new version of that song, didn't I? Just to sort of contrast. I wonder if that is something that could take us down another rabbit hole. Perhaps I know what I'll do is I'll just jump to the final chorus of the new version of it. And we'll see how it sounds. Oops. Similar. It is pretty similar, but I don't know. There's something a bit rawer about the original. There's something a little bit more, maybe a little bit more inspired about it. I don't know. Original Synth saying you're a procrastinator and I'm constantly inspiring you to do more stuff. Yes, I want to have some purpose in life. That makes me happy. Okay, let's have a look then. All right, I'm going to play. I think this is my favourite song that we've ever done in like the 25-year history or whatever. Oh God, 26-year history. Ugh. And this one's got some really interesting synthesizers on it as well. Recorded with the master Tim Lewis at his studio. Predominantly on his Hammond B3, beautiful, proper, real deal Hammond B3. That's the main instrument. A few little lashings of the Baldwin electric harpsichord is on here. Also, this song is dating back to 2007, and it features the Prophet 08 Oh, so 2008 it is. 2008. Yeah, because the Prophet 08 came out 2008. Rob Greensmith, who's our kind of I don't call him a roadie, but he would help out and he would drive us places and stuff. And he bought it, the Prophet 08, when it was like just came out. It was a brand new synth, and we took it along to this session, and we ended up using it for the synth solo at the end. Now, listen out for this synth solo right at the very end, because in the original arrangement, there wasn't anything on it. It was just like a kind of Hammond and bass kind of sort of riffing, and felt that it needed something else. So Frank went in there and he did the solo that you'll hear at the end, first take. Just without really practicing it, he did it first take, and it's amazing. Okay, so interesting things to spot on this song then. So yeah, so you can hear for the Baldwin. How would I describe the song? Is a little bit like a kind of, it's a haunted house disco. I reckon that's probably the easiest way to describe it as a genre. So maybe little trimmings of some nightmare ambience around the edges, but really, yeah, it's haunted house. It's haunted house disco. That's a genre that we didn't invent, actually. Gentle Giant invented it with their incredible Spooky Boogie from 1978. That is an essential Halloween DJ tune to spin, because it's got a hell of a fat groove on it. Spooky Boogie. Yes, so this is our take of a haunted house disco. And what else is there interesting to spot on it? Oh yeah, there's this one little bit where Frank's doing some little doodle-doodle-doo, and I heard this little kind of answer keyboard line that I wanted to put in. So Frank did this little synth overdub, and we used Tim's Yamaha. Now let me think what it's called. The CS5, is it? Yamaha did a really small little analog synth in the early 80s. Chat room, I need your help on this. Can't remember which model it is now, but I've got a funny little story about one. Years ago in South Wales, there was this newspaper called the Free Ads. It was like it was a yellow newspaper thing, and it was just pages and pages of just people selling secondhand stuff. And we used to scour it back in the 90s, because you still could find things. You'd find a Juno 106, 150 quid, maybe 200 quid, SH 101, 100 quid, prices for that stuff were really, you could get them from the Free Ads. CS5, thank you, Andrew. Oh, CS01. Ooh, CS01. The CS01 was a CS5 with mini keys. Thank you. It was a CS01. Anyway, gosh, this was years ago now. I don't think we had access. Oh, we might have had internet access, but there wasn't the wealth of knowledge on it that there is now. And Frank had saw that there was a Yamaha CS01 for sale, but he thought he got confused. He thought it was a CS80. It's a funny story, this is. And he didn't drive at the time, and he still doesn't now. But he said to me, "Oh, guys, can we go on this? I can't believe it. It's like 50 quid or something. It's like this. It's like the most amazing Yamaha synth." And but it was a long way. We had to drive about 70 miles or something. But he's going, "Oh yeah." So we walked into this guy's house, and he said, "Yeah, it's just on a table behind the door." And he opened the door. We were expecting this massive synth, and instead it was this teeny little weeny one. And in our disappointment, we didn't buy it. One of those great regrets. But anyway, that was yeah. So that's one thing. It just goes in two places. So that's one thing to look out for. The little CS01 finally making its appearance. So when we put that on, it was a little nod to that little adventure that we had all those years before. What else is there to note on this? There's lots of time changes and more tempo changes with this song. And in the early days of the writing process, it kind of went wrong, the song, and Sean tried to pick it up, and we went off onto a different groove in a different tempo, a slower kind of thing. Unintentionally, it was just in the, it was literally in the early jamming stages, just right at the beginning. But we're listening back to some of the recordings, and it was really cool. It was this kind of weird tempo change. It was really cool. So that happens about 2/3 of the way through. There's something this great tempo change, and then we pick back up and try and get back to roughly where we were before. So I was mentioning earlier about with a band just going to different tempos is quite weird, but once you rehearse it, I tell you, that's all about confidence. You've got to collectively have the confidence to sort of do those tempo drops, and it does take rehearsal and everybody having that sort of inner understanding of the song. Anyway, I'm going to play the song because this song, I think, is a bit special. It's called Manners, and it's about the importance of manners, which is like a really peculiar thing to make a rock and roll song about. But I'll tell you, though, I'm a huge believer in manners. I think manners makes the world turn. Manners is recognizing your fellow human and being nice and kind to them, So yes, here's an ode to good manners rendered in haunted house disco style. I'll see you on the other side.
Manners make the man, they make the man who knows his place on earth. While all around the world is getting worse. Manners make the man, they make him understand that he is God. To hold it in my hand is all I want. Manners make the man, they make a man accustomed to his face. Yeah, manners make the world a better place.
Here we go.
Satan loves his job, he loves his condo, piano, farm, hotel. The neighbors don't appreciate the smell. A fool, now understand, you act how you will act 10 times again. A fixed direction from your birth to death. Manners make the man, they make a man accustomed to his face. Yeah, manners make the world a better place. Manners makes the world turn. Manners makes the world turn. Manners makes the world turn. Manners makes the world turn.
Oh yeah. Manners. Yeah. All right. See, I don't reckon there's ever been a song that extols the virtue of manners in such a way. So, so yes, I pointed out the little CSO1 little bit. Yeah, and that solo at the end, just that really little solo at the end. Frank did that first take just straight off the bat like that. It was, I just thought it was astonishing, really. Oh, it's like a Steve Porcaro solo. That's cool. Okay, I'm going to speed through the last two tunes now. I think it's two. Right. Yes. So this next song that I'm going to play, I think what's quite interesting about this one is it's a good one of showing the three different singers in the group. So as mentioned, Sean on drums, Frank on keys and guitar, and me on bass, and all three of us. Oops, oh, not those manners. All three of us would sing, and you might be getting slightly familiar with the voices now. So Frank's voice, you've been hearing that one quite. You've been hearing that quite a lot. So for instance, manners, that's him. That's Frank. Oh no, that's. Oh gosh, I didn't play Mimesis. Holy cow. I said I was going to play a song earlier. I must have got distracted and played the wrong one. So yes, we haven't heard Mimesis. That's the song that's got the ARP 2600 in. I'm going to play this one first, though, because this one's quite interesting in that it uses the three different singers in the band in a very creative way. So Frank's voice is the main voice you hear in the verses, and me and Sean come in and we add like little vocals in, and then when it goes more into the kind of chorus, there's a section where it's just me and Sean, and then there's a bit where my voice goes into the kind of lead line there and Sean's voice is in the backing, and then Frank's voice comes back in to do the lead. And then in the end it goes to Sean being the lead vocalist. So there's three very distinct sort of lead vocals across this song, and we would use our voices as kind of textures, as kind of it's like the texture. Frank's voice is really suitable for as you'll hear, for these kind of things. My voice is maybe a little bit more of the emotive, and then Sean just brings the beauty. He's beautiful singing. Sean's got the nicest voice. Mine's maybe the more loudest, and then Frank's is kind of the coolest. So here we go. It's quite a dark lyric to this. Good song.
Woke up, got out of bed, wrong head, wrong hat. The hardest thing I ever had to do. And still, like anyone, I had no heart. The disappointed angels sing to me, and they said, "We want your soul, starving for your soul. Give it to me, give it to me. Someone's gonna help you out one day, it's just one day. You still got all the rest, and if they help you out, don't you forget about them. Yes, oh yes, oh yes. Someone will help you out again. Don't you forget about your friends. The end of everything there is, no start. Helplessly they fall into their graves. One day, all this will burn the sun. No guess. The disappointed angels sing to me, and they said, "We want your soul, table in the shed. And if there is no kind, don't be unkind. Shake those screaming angels from your mind. And they said, someone's gonna help you out. One day is just one day. You still got all the rest. And if they help you out, don't you forget about them. Yes, oh yes. Someone's gonna help you out. One day is just one day. You still got all the rest. And if they help you out, don't you forget about them. Yes, oh yes, oh yes. Someone will help you. They'll help you out again. Oh, don't you forget. Don't you forget. Don't you forget about your friends. About your friends. About your friends.
Oh yes, we like a big ending. Yeah, I mean that song, it's dealing with kind of potential suicide, or suicidal feelings, and the importance of friends. Someone's going to help you out. So it's got, it's a positive message, but the chair is on the table in the shed, ready to, it's all alluding to like someone about to take their own life, but so very serious thing, but it's kind of, yeah, I think it's a good message. But I think the interplay of the vocals, I really like that there, because I feel that was a really unique thing about the band. And just one little thing about that, this is something that I've had a few conversations with friends recently about. One thing I've always done with the bands that I've in is that any royalties, everything is always even split across everybody. So if someone wrote like 100% of the song, we would share the royalties across all the members, and the reason to that was just not to get into sort of niggly things like, oh yeah, but I wrote the bridge on that, or oh, it's my idea to do a double chorus or whatever it is. Just eliminate that, and you see it in the bands, the long-term bands who've been successful. I'm not saying we've been successful, but the bands who have been successful, they've done that. And where the lineup has stayed the same, like Coldplay, for instance, as much as I find them, they are very good at what they do, I guess, but they've always shared the royalties. So Chris Martin, being the primary songwriter, acknowledges the time commitment that everyone puts in, all those hours spent on the road, going up and down the country, when one person, like if you got a band, a collective of people working together, and then one member starts to get more money than the others, resentment builds up, and typically that tears bands apart. But U2's another band, that have always shared the royalties. Radiohead's another one that shares the royalties. Muse, lots of bands who do it. It really is a very, very crucial thing to keep that togetherness. I mean, Oasis are a band who didn't do it. And look at that, by the second album, everyone's gone apart from the Gallagher brothers and Bonehead, and then Bonehead lasted about another album, and then he was gone, Sort of like, yeah, something... thanks, Andrew Brooks. Good night. Gosh, I've gone on for a while, haven't I, here? Well, I hope everyone's enjoyed it. I mean, I've got a couple more songs to play, so if you want to hang out with me for a little bit longer, I'll go the distance. But what I will do in future shows is give you a little bit more of a heads up about when this thing is going to be available, and whether it'll be available physically. I was thinking we'd probably just do it as a digital release, but. We'll see. It's something. And if there's any record labels out there who want to put it out, or if you know anyone who's got a label who might like it, please get in touch, because, we're literally just going to put it out because, it's just been sitting there, for 20 years. Oh, well, not they're not 20. Some of them do date back quite a while. I was going to say, though, I did say I was going to play a song that had never ever been heard, and I'm going to do that one now. And this one has got, got the ARP 2600 in it, and it's also, what else has it got? Oh yeah, there's a dated joke. There's a musical joke. Now, this song dates back. This is one of the oldest ones. It dates back to 2001. And if anyone thinks it sounds a bit like one of Battles' tunes, it's way before that. That's a really cool little tune. I like it. It's called Mimesis. And mimesis, that's a curious word. I'm just going to remember I'm going to have to just look up the definition of mimesis again. It's come out of Frank's head. Imitative representation of the real world in art and literature. Yeah. So it's the Bart has always detached his use of plot from mimesis. What does mimesis mean? The imitation of life in art and literature. You've probably heard that life imitates art. Well, art imitates life. When art imitates life, it's mimesis, originally a Greek word meaning imitation. Yeah, so mimesis basically means a copycat or mimic. There we go. Yes. Never let it be said that the Gaz Williams Show is not an educational experience for all. Have I heard about the new InterSystems album? No, I haven't. And Chris is suggesting TuneCore. Okay, that's not something that I've considered. Okay, so I'll just press on a little bit. Not many more. Not many songs left. But I think I'll go the distance if that's all right. So quite a long stream, but hey, I'm enjoying it. I hope some of you are too. Okay, so Mimesis. Things to listen out for. Definitely the ripping 2600 when it comes in. Oh yeah, and the musical joke at the end. Basically, we did a little simulation of when a CD gets stuck. Duck, 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 duck. I mean, you know, and CDRs could be terrible for it as well, just getting duck, 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 duck. So we tried to mimic in the song Mimesis a CD getting stuck, and then yeah, so that's one. So listen out for the CD getting stuck. Listen out for the the ripping ARP 2600 when that comes in. There's also, my goodness, there's some there's some kind of interesting keys on this. Mini Moog. Yeah, there's some great Mini Moog on here. What else? We laid it down guitar and bass, drums. And then we added some of the keys with Tim Lewis. Again, this is done at okay, here we go.
Unconscious, but my heart beat like a cordless phone. Feet push me backwards, feel my head cut on the broken stone. Strange how it slows to a stall when you need time to go fast now.
All right. Mimesis, yeah. Cool. Oh my goodness. Gosh, I'm gonna power through these last few songs. Oh my goodness. I want to say thank you so much about all these lovely comments in the chat room. I feel this is something that is really close to my heart. And sharing this with everybody. I mean, that song there has never been heard before in public. So it's the very first time. And in fact, a lot of these really haven't actually. So this is quite special for me. I just, yes, I'm really enjoying it. And yeah, so thank you ever so much. So those, really great comments, they really mean the world to me. And it's going to help kind of get this stuff out the door, finally, after all these years. Okay, so, all right. So now, some of you might have heard this next one because I made a video of this one as well. And this is one of the more recent songs. And it's kind of about consumerism. It's called Phantom Phone Vibration. And it's a song about, how people are manipulated, myself included, really. I mean, it really is something that has come from trying to understand my own allure to technology and wanting to always get the latest thing. It's something I've always had. It's terrible, really. I'm always, just wanting the latest, greatest thing. And it's a song about that. And it's because phantom phone vibration itself is that thing where you sometimes feel the phone ringing in your pocket or vibrating like you've had a message and you haven't even got it on you. But I was using it as a bit of a metaphor for this, for the thing that you haven't got. Okay, so here we go. Inky, you're amazing. Oh, look at these lovely comments. Honestly, it's really, really, really cool. Yes. God, these messages move so quickly. I did see something about Stuart McConey maybe liking it. He's someone I should hit up with it, really. Okay. So here we go. This is called Phantom Phone Vibration. It's got a bit King Crimson, a lot of King Crimson influence in this song, I think.
Touch antenna scratch, making to rolls an enemy. Pay them well with NFC, extend your lifetime.
another cinematic chord on the end there. Cool. Yeah, so, bit like Red and Discipline, Native VS says. And then I think actually the Phantom Foam Vibration bit, I guess, it was subconscious, I think, but I think it's got a bit of In the Court of the Crimson King about it or something. But definite King Crimson influence there, amongst some other things too. Yeah, so that was played with a Fender, that was. But actually, that tune there is a... there's quite a nice little thing on there, just about like the way, you know, the band works in that I've pretty much written this song. I had the riff, that do riff, and you know, Frank, what he comes up with, you know, he kind of plays it in unison, but then he kind of goes into that crunchy skank halfway through, you know. So this is great. Frank's mind doing this, swapping it to the skank there, you know. I'd have never come up with that. You know, that's one of the great things about being in a collaboration. When the collaborators do things that are way outside of your own kind of, you know, ideas. You know, and I think that's a great example of it there. I think that little riff. Okay, well, we're nearly there. I think we're down to 2 left, so we'll speed through this one now. So, oh yes, yeah. Now this next one, this was it's a beauty. It's a great one, but it's a little bit, this one has got a bit of a controversial ending. It's quite intense. It's quite an intense ending, and this song is it's a classic sci-fi kind of. There's kind of like a sci-fi plot to this song. It's called "The Country of the Kind." I think it's based on a sci-fi novel, I think, of the same name that Frank had read years ago. And the premise is that everybody's is kept on happy drugs. There's a computer game called We Happy Few that's come out recently, and that is this song. I mean, that's a very similar. It's a very similar thing where, you know, everyone's on happy drugs because life is so awful that in order to make it bearable, everyone's on these kind of happy drugs. But the protagonist of the song stops taking his drugs. He starts seeing everything as it really is. And then in the middle, it kind of cuts to this big kind of stadium kind of thing where the kind of the great leaders, you know, are kind of extolling the virtues of these drugs, of this kind of wonderful country of the kind. So it's that's the sort of gist of this one, but it ends in a really bleak way. I mean, if we look at the waveform there, I'm talking about this end section here, you know. So it's sort of it's quite an intense ending. But here we go. It's a curious tune. It's got a lot of twists and turns in this one and some very odd time signatures. I've never really worked out exactly what it is. Typically, when we play around with time signatures in this band, Sean, the drummer, doesn't like to count. He hates counting bars and stuff. For him, counting affects his feel. He needs to know it. He needs to know it instinctively. So... in order to get to that, it means you have to play it a lot. We have played this song an awful lot live over the years, but it's quite a tricky one. It's quite dynamic, and as you hear, it's got some odd twists and turns in it. Here we go, Country of the Kind.
Sister asked me what's wrong. Why'd you write such sad songs? Must've got those bad views. Best you leave those thoughts soon. Bye. Good health, sweet dreams, nice thoughts. Obey, live well, be nice, succeed, flourish. Hurt yourself with that was stupid and bad. Tea with water, yeah, yeah. Pleasant voices take you back to good health, sweet dreams, nice thoughts. Obey, live well, be nice, succeed. Sister told me lie back, wear the headphones and straps. How could you be so blind in the country of the
Holy cow. Yeah. That's a bit intense ending on that one. Yeah. Yeah, Country the Kind. Oh my goodness, we are so nearly there. There is one song left. So if you are just picking up the stream, if you've joined later than I've been running this stream for a blooming long time. Oh my god, I think this is an epic length show tonight. Thank you so much for everyone for sticking around. So this is the Rocketgoldstar album. It's been literally 20 years in the making, which is it's just so ludicrous to even think that. But yeah. And I really want to find a way of getting this out very, very soon. So yes, so this is an exclusive first play. Most of these songs really, and certainly in this context, have never been heard before. This is the first time they have been heard outside of a very, 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 very tightly kind of knit and, little thing, really. So one last song. I think. Let me just have a quick look. I think that's it. Yeah, there's one last song. And this is going to be the ending. It's the heaviest thing we've ever done. And it's quite intense in places. But the payoff is the outro, which is beautiful. And Sean, there's a lot. This is a dark song. This is a dark song. The outro is gorgeous, though. And if we look at the structure of it there, I mean, these are, I think these are, these haven't had their final kind of leveling. These have been processed through the silver bullet from Louder Than Liftoff, which is an external hardware unit, and allowed for some EQ tweaks and stuff. But there will be a tiny final kind of mastering process that these will go through, just to do with a little bit of final leveling. Although I think they're plenty kind of loud enough. I think I think with these kind of songs, you're asking quite a bit out of the listener in a way. You're asking a certain commitment of the listener, because the songs don't follow conventional form, and have really quite unusual structures. Although there's some big sing-along moments, and I think that is what I'm hoping is ultimately the thing about these songs, is when you get to know them a little bit, you can sing along, really belt out along with them. And we've had these at gigs where, our lovely fans have just been brilliant and sing along with the songs. So I like to think that even though they've got their twists and turns, they are still kind of pop songs in a way, in there somewhere. It's just, But once you get to know them a little bit and you know the bits are coming up, that's what I love about a lot of my favourite music is... sometimes I'm a little bit confused after the first listens to some things that have gone on to be my favourite things. And, in this kind of super fast, disposable culture we live in, is whether people will have time to, to learn to like these songs and to, to want to kind of, have a relationship with these songs. You do have relationships with songs. One of my kind of bugbears really is that, like a pretty awful song, if it's played enough, everyone will just start to... Once you know it and you don't unknow it, you kind of lose perspective of whether a song is terrible or not. And I remember the first time I ever heard Rock DJ by Robbie Williams, and just thought it was just like the worst song I'd ever heard in my life. But after a while, just because it was a, just omnipresent song, I heard it everywhere I went. Actually, I saw the video, which is really, really weird, where he strips his skin off. But after a while, you know the song, you know all the bits of the song, not by choice, just by exposure to it. And then you kind of sort of lose your critical faculties a little bit because you can't unknow something once you know it. And that happens with so many songs, and you just kind of go, oh... So, like, if these crazy, twisty little tunes were given enough exposure, I mean, I'm not expecting that at all. I've got very low expectation about this music now. I used to have huge expectation. I wanted to be the next Queen, yes, Rush, Beatles, and in a way, an obsession with trying to be like a great band is the thing that's sort of stopped these songs coming out earlier. Really, it's a sort of thing of having too much ambition, and really we should have just put things out as they were back when they were fresh, and but we didn't, and here we are 20 years later. Max saying, am I interested in analog tape at all? He's putting his tracks through a 1/4-inch tape for mastering. Yeah. Well, I mean, in a way, putting it through the silver bullet does a similar thing. And that's the idea, really, that if you record something in the digital domain, for many, many years, in fact, for years and years, I'd been under the impression that the very best approach was to only do 2 digital conversions. The first in through the mics, or what lines, through the analog to digital conversion right at source at the beginning of the process. It stay in the analog, in the digital domain, all the way through until it goes to CD or whatever it is, and it's playing back on someone's computer and it's decoding, and then it only returns to analog to the end listener. So the performance to the end listener, it has one in and one out. So I worked to that for years. And the concept of analog, of analog summing, or just taking things out and then to go back in, involving another digital conversion process, I'd avoided like the plague, thinking that it was a bit overrated. Now I am like a zealot. I'm such a convert to it. So taking it out and maybe running it through tape, as Mac just suggested, is a great way of doing it. But something to think about that I'd never really considered before was the fact is that the mix down itself you've generated in the digital domain, like a new thing, which is an amalgamation of obviously all the tracks and stuff mixed down. To take that and feed it through something analog, and then back again, it does do a profound thing. So I mastered an album yesterday, and I put every track through the analog heat, the electron analog heat. If you're interested in that as a mastering device, I've actually got a video on my channel where I go through it, and I think I use some of these songs, I think. And that does a really good job. The Silver Bullet arguably did it even better. But something happens, I think, that this sort of digital mix goes through the analog process and it kind of binds it together. And I think in the case of these tunes, these Rocketgoldstar tunes that I've lived with for a very long time, once I heard them after they'd been through the Silver Bullet, it came back sounding like a record. And these tracks from all these different years sort of take some kind of uniformity through having gone through that process. They sound more kind of like each other now. And one thing I really hope is the case, and maybe, having heard this album with one more to go, obviously, I hope you all think it will stick together like an album. It's certainly an exploratory kind of trip of an album. The songs don't stay still, and they're all definite little mini adventures that, I'm really hoping will be rewarding for people in the long run once they get to know it. And anyway, that's my hope for this material, really. Anyway, we're going to move on to the final song. I say it's a controversial song, really, this one as well, for reasons. There's some private things I can't really mention about to do with this song, to do with it, something that had happened within the band relationships. So there's a very dark energy surrounding this song. However, when it gets into the end bit, you can see like the first 2/3 of it are pretty heavy, and then it goes into just a beautiful outro, and that's how the album's going to end. So I'll see you on the other side of this, and then I think we'll be calling it a night. So if you can just bear with me for this, then we'll have done the whole album. Here we go.
Life
All right. And there we go. And on that's the last. That's the last of it. So another big cinematic slamming chord at the end there. Oh, look at these awesome comments. Thank you so much. Well, I'm going to probably sign off now because I've been on way longer than I intended to. Again, I just want to say thank you ever so much for everyone who's joined me on this little trip through the new Rocketgoldstar album, new old Rocketgoldstar album, whatever you want to call it. 20 years in the making, 9 songs. That's all. No, but I mentioned at the beginning of the show that these songs are really, we were keeping back all our premium songs. So the working title of the album might well be the name of the album, is The Royal Album, which has taken on a very funny extra twist with, this modern shenanigans that's been happening. And I guess it's ready, really. It's been ready for a long time, I suppose, but going through the silver bullet, processing it through the silver bullet, though, just I don't know, it brought it all together, and it's given it like a real kind of rock and roll sort of tonality that I'm really pleased. Native VS would love to get it on vinyl at some point. Yeah, it works. The length is great for vinyl, so I'd love to do that. And maybe, I should perhaps tout it around a little bit to a few labels just to see before we put it out. But then I don't really necessarily want to hold it up because it's been held up for such a long time. But the songs are from different periods, really, ranging from that one, would you believe, goes back to 2001. Yeah, 2001, that last song, in its complete form, exactly as you just heard it, more or less, other than the fact of the silver bullet. Anyway, oh, David Hardman, what a great end to an otherwise crappy day. Brilliant, just bloody brilliant. Oh, thank you. Wow. Oh my God, thank you so much. This is great. This has given me big, warm belly kind of, making me very happy indeed. So yeah, thanks once more. I'll probably announce on a future show or through social media when it is available. But Rocketgoldstar is the band. I've been Gauss Williams. I'll be back on Monday with my Eurorack adventures in Eurorack. Some big changes going on there, so exciting stuff there. If that's something that you may be interested in, and I'll be back as well next week at 8 p.m. My goodness, this is the longest stream I think I've ever done. But thank you so much for those of you who've done the distance, who've gone the distance with me, and big love. We'll see you soon. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.